Hello, lovelies. Oh man, am I tired. Tired and lower than a Dachshund's balls. But you gotta keep going, don't you? What's the alternative? So yeah, tired, exhausted, creativity is not really flowing. Spent so much effort looking after other people, and don't feel bad about it at all, but who's gonna look after me? I'm trying also as much as is possible to save as much money as is allowed in case all of these disability shenanigans do get whacked. Speaking of which, my Patreon is only a few dollars short of the $200 breakpoint, after which I start producing Patreon exclusive content occasionally. In theory, it is tabletopless tonight, but some of the crew still has the lurgy, so it may or may not. I'm hoping to find out in good order. It is also T-shirted Historians show tonight, The Week in Geek. Search, subscribe, come watch us shoot the shit about the latest nerd bollocks. And then tomorrow I should be running more Fabula Ultima, so there's that to look forward to. Alright, on to the comments. On Path of the Aram Tier, the Eclectic Goat, whose show I've been on a couple of times, go and check them out, says, have I ever mentioned that I smile every time you say lovelies? No idea why, but I love it. It's the accent. Every time. Rockefeller Rothschild, interesting name, says, nobody is playing these games. At this point it's just a book fetish. People should just make campaign books and stop designing games. We have enough game mechanics to last centuries. Nobody gonna give us anything dramatically different from what we have now. I don't know. And you gotta remember that the open gaming license idea has only been around since, 2000? And there are more games in heaven and earth than dreamt of in your philosophy, Rockefeller. And not every one of them needs to operate with the same rules. There's a thing called genre emulation. D20 based games, they're not everything. Speaking of which, on the Outgunned review, Beetlejuice says, what I get from most of the dice mechanics reviews is that they're only good if they can simulate and be predictable regarding some sort of probabilities people are fixed upon. This way of thinking usually forces you to do maths in every single roll. Take Feng Shui for example. D6 minus D6, then plus stat, then plus minus mod. Simple, right? Well, not for everybody, and you have to do this every single roll. Instead, Outgunned, a game I've not played, offers a fun mechanic where you have to match numbers. And it's not worse than rolling D6s in a D6 pool. Is it less predictable about chances? Yes. Is it more fun to roll every single time? For me, absolutely. Once I understood these are games, not simulations. Right, but genre emulation is also a form of simulation. It's just not simulating reality. That is the major difference. So in order to simulate a genre, the dice mechanics should provide the kinds of results that you expect from the genre. In Feng Shui, for example, the more outrageous the stunt you try to pull off, the more likely it is that you'll succeed, which does not model reality, but does model Hong Kong action cinema and wuxia, kung fu cinema, things like that. Something like Call of Cthulhu, despite its eldritch aspects, is rooted in reality. So the odds and chances of doing things successfully should somewhat closely map to what we expect from reality, which is that moderately skilled person doing something moderately difficult should probably succeed the vast and overwhelming majority of the time. So these things are important, because setting and system should be in synergy, if at all possible. On Trump just cornholed analog gaming, there was quite a bit of whining from magats, but yeah. Volcolapatrion says, I cannot feel too bad about people who are going on about social progression, about censoring their cards to be more politically correct or respectful to natives by removing orcs or removing historical figures. Then the same people complain that they couldn't outsource for cheap labour. Besides, these tariffs will be torn down in just a few years. Well, that turned out to be quicker than we thought, didn't it? Well, except for the Chinese ones, which are the problematic ones. So, the ideological moral panics are far worse. The totalitarianism is far worse. Well, this is a form of totalitarianism. It's an abuse of power based upon personal vendettas and... Well, Trump isn't ideological, but the people around him are ideological. Trump is petty and venal and vengeful and, according to recent reports, has a sub 100 IQ. So, but then that's also an aspect of totalitarianism, the petty vindictiveness and the paranoia. And some of this is that the things that you want can't be made in the numbers that you want or need outside of China, or more accurately, Southeast Asia these days, because China is outsourcing. So what are you supposed to do? There isn't another option. People aren't willing to pay the higher prices, and you often can't get these things made outside of this option. So then, what do? Just not make it? These are the questions that a lot of people are facing. Not me so much, because I don't really make a lot of board games. So, I'm all good. I am curious how it is going to affect the game crafter, though. I haven't seen a statement from them. I should go looking for one. On the consumer versus artiste video, Trapdoor Spider says, my group's first AFM game, that's Actual Fucking Monsters, one of my games, good choice, was Siege of Midian. Drop them right into the fight, let them flex their powers and test out how gory they would play it. That's why being an auteur can aid at the table, but I'd not be able to come up with anything commercial that wasn't riddled with copyright issues. There are ways and means around it, and by and large most people don't give a shit about TTRPG rights because most tie-in TTRPGs don't make a huge amount of money. So, there's that to consider. Edward Kopp says, I love food and beverages so much I became a chef and sommelier. And I love suits. So I buy suits from one of the finest American tailors and custom-made shoes to order. I love those things. I love fine dining and staying in fancy hotels for special events. But I don't expect luxury products all day, every day. I love hot dogs with sweet pickle relish, spicy deli, mustard and Heinz ketchup. I drink Coke with my pepperoni pizza and draft beer with my tavern burger. I love finding that perfect apple cider donut in a local bakery and the fried fish shack that is perfect. My taste is broad, wide and deep. So yeah, there are always exceptions. I always think of Anthony Bourdain and how he loved street food around the world. Must have had a stomach of steel. But, he also loved the fancy stuff. And was pretty accomplished in and of himself. So, yeah, there are some of us that like the trash as well as the treasure, but we're pretty rare. And even then, the pursuit of trash can be a pursuit of something raw and authentic in a way. So the pursuit of trash can become pretentious in and of itself as well. All of these things have fuzzy lines around the outside of them. Mr. Prickly says, the dog food to filet mignon metaphor reminds me of those who prefer AI to real artwork made by a real artist. They're like thoughtless pigs shouting, I don't care about all that, just give me my next spoonful of slop. It's disheartening. To create things real artists make, visual art, writing, music, etc., takes time, energy, talent, and a whole lot of soul. The average consumer needs to be reminded of that. I get that you're an anti-AI zealot, and that is fine, as an artist. I think you're going to have to accept that it's here to stay and that it has a role, and you're probably going to have to incorporate it into your own work process. Just the same way people did with Photoshop or digital photography itself, or all of these other things. You know, I'm a writer. I think my job is under far more threat than artists. It's a lot easier, I think, to produce reasonable quality AI writing, and so our process becomes one more of sculpting and refinement and having good ideas in the first place. I don't think human writing or human art will ever go away, but I think there is a delineation between content and art. I think people were already talking about this before AI art came onto the scene. You know, the creativity was being devalued into content. I don't necessarily think it's devalued, which goes back to what we were talking about with, you know, you can appreciate commercial art, you can appreciate, you know, ad copy even, or the design on a packet of toaster strudels, or whatever else. You know, in a sense, all art is art. All writing is writing. You know, and there is a role for this stuff, like YouTube thumbnails, things like that, where the majority of people are either going to steal art or they're going to reuse the same assets over and over and over again. Or when you're running a role-playing game, you know, just for you and your friends, I don't think there's any harm using AI then. There's a lot of context in which I think it's perfectly fine, and we're still finding our way, but I cannot help but be reminded whenever someone loses their rag over AI of Photoshop and digital photography and innumerable other things. People used to complain about spell check, for God's sake. Yeah. On the old Godbound review, Edward Kopp again says, if you're not an OSR gamer and not a D&D 5e gamer, what kind of gamer are you? Terminology-wise, I think I would just say a gamer. It's been very rare that there's been an occasion where there is a gamer identity, really, I suppose. There is story gamer, and there was, you know, storyteller gamer for people who were into World of Darkness stuff. For me, I kind of fall in the middle. I like a lot of the ideas behind story gaming, indie gaming, and so on. I also appreciate where the OSR is coming from, and as I've gotten older, I can appreciate the value that D&D, even 4th edition, has brought to the hobby. But I don't fit in any particular camp. I am a game whore. So there you go. I'm a game whore, or slut, I guess, since I do it for free. On the disabilities and AI video, which probably has the rest of the comments, I think people were quite interested in that one. K-Mike says, I'd be a hypocrite if I complained about AI art when I use ChatGPT to translate my blunt way of talking into corpo speak. As for reasonable accommodations, I got told to fuck off back to my doctor for asking for a 1 hour later start time. See, as long as you make up the time, right? A 1 hour later start time, it does depend on the business, but you know, that sounds like a reasonable accommodation. But are people going to follow and conform to the law? That's the question. A law is only as good as its enforcement in a lot of ways. And I find it ironic that now a lot of people in corporations seem to be using Grammarly's AI function or ChatGPT or whatever to draft the emails from plain speaking into corpo speak that they then send to each other, and then often at the other end use AI or whatever to, you know, de-translate into plain speaking again, which suggests that corpo speak is entirely unnecessary if people could just communicate in a straightforward fashion with each other. I find that funny. But yeah, what does constitute a reasonable accommodation for someone with a disability? And what constitutes a reasonable accommodation if you develop a disability while you're at a company, or if you're hired, cognizant that you have a particular disability, and flexi time. These are open questions that aren't particularly well defined. Scream Monkey says, off the cuff, it's a low labour effort, you're not shoveling gravel, and it can be done from home. Demand field. It will also not pay the bills outside of the top creators, so you need support from something outside the money, whatever little there is earned from game writing. So young, physically fit humans will be in the general labour market. Also crap work-life balance for everyone else. We don't have the time to work on RPGs. Yeah. I mean, we talked about some of this in the video as reasons why it might be that more people with mental and physical disabilities work in RPGs, and yeah, I agree. There's other reasons. Flynn Latif says, people keep accusing stuff I made 10 years ago of being AI with the hatred of a true Timo jihadist. That's the only real demoralizing thing within all of this. Yeah, everyone's on such a witch hunt. It's understandable to a degree that people are so upset, but there is a lot of friendly fire going on, stuff being accused of being AI which isn't, or anyone that incorporates AI in any way in their process being lumped in with people who are just generating nonsense. And there's a whole bunch of rip-off artists out there as well, because when the economy's bad you get grifters. That's just how it is. Logan Rogers was horribly triggered by my mention of Marx, even though it was only in the context of material conditions, and says communism is immoral. He went on to have a typically politically illiterate diatribe about all of that. Sure, you could take the libertarian view that sharing is somehow wrong and immoral, but isn't hoarding also immoral? Isn't it as immoral to let someone starve as it is to make them starve, in a way, or at least on the same spectrum, so I think the argument can be made either way, but then Logan had no real idea what communism meant in the first place, and probably doesn't know about any other political ideologies and what they mean or entail either, so I generally find that to be the case. Mr. Prickly says, as someone who had to fight to get an operation that would restore my ability to use my right arm, whilst learning how to write and draw with my left, I can tell you that, for me, thank you for the emphasis, AI is never going to be an option. I could be in a car crash, lose both arms, and never even think of using AI. I'd sooner learn to draw with my feet than use AI. Or put the pen in my mouth than use AI. Sorry, Jim, you'll never convince me otherwise. I mean, that's fine for you, right? But should other people be shackled to your particular vehemence in this? Right? I occasionally use it to give me idea prompts if I get stuck, if I have writer's block, and it helps me get over that by helping kind of kickstart my imagination again to get going. Is that wrong? What if someone is an extremely accomplished fantasy artist, someone who used to work on D&D, for example, and the work's dried up and they're getting older and they need to retire, but they can't afford to retire? Would there be a problem with them feeding their own work into an AI model and then continuing to produce their own work in their own style, working with the AI to refine and working on top of it to refine, right? Thereby allowing them to continue their career to at least some extent, but with less effort and overcoming physical disabilities, so that they can stay viable, continue to earn in a business that often has no pension, no healthcare, nothing, right? That goes for a lot of creative endeavors, even people who are reasonably successful. So what about them? You know, it's not a black and white issue. It is nuanced and interesting, and in people's Temu jihad against AI, I think they're missing a lot of these nuances and subtleties around the edges. Like, most people hadn't even considered how it might play a role for disabled creators. Me and my collaborators seem to be the first people who've really thought about that. I'm sure the argument will end up being misused by the zealots on the other side, but I think it's a genuine issue. Excuse me. The Eclectic Goat says, why so many game designers are disabled? While I edit rather than create, I think too that we're of a generation where it was those of us who were broken who were most likely to get into gaming when we were younger. We're the ones who couldn't do sports or other normal activities of the time, which means as popularity rises, we're the ones with the gaming experience needed to create new game systems. I'm sure that's a part of it too. I mean, there was an amount of being the nerd or the socially awkward kid who was outcast and ended up in these things, and there's definitely also, you know, there were the fat kids. There were kids like me who had asthma and just weren't interested in sport. There was a lot of that, I think, and those kind of people, yeah, my kind of people, also got fairly broken by the school system as it was, from bullying and abuse and so on. So that probably plays a role as well, I think, and I think that is a disconnect with some of the newer generation of gamers, the popular front. Sally Campolet says, I can relate to how you feel. AI is there to help. It's a tool, and like all other tools, it is used to make things easier. This AI debate is very similar to the analog versus digital photography argument back in the late 90s. Why would we gatekeep photography behind the access to a darkroom and all the expensive chemicals? Dinosaurs resisted, and now they all have fancy DSLRs. It will be the same for AI assistants. P.S. Having a team full of people with mental disorders is total chaos. My team consists of only the insane and management, and it's hell. On the other hand, I want to work with them because only they have the creative spark I was desperately seeking. And yeah, that's the kind of Faustian bargain you enter into when you work with people like me. Yeah, we have issues which can help us with our creativity, but at the same time, they're issues. And I think you're right, this will eventually win, just because it's the path of least resistance. But it's how we incorporate it that's going to be important, and it's that interests me, finding hybrid ways of working, finding ways to use it to help the neurodiverse or neuro-oppressed, if you will, and the physically disabled and the elderly to keep going, to remain being productive, to remain being creative. So I think when you are a creative person, you never really retire. Not really, because you're driven to create. It's a form of madness in and of its own, I think. And yeah, do we really want to gatekeep? When I think about it, the advent of PDF publishing and everything really massively lowered the bar for getting into publication, getting into game publication. And much as I might rail against a lot of the dreck and trash that comes out, I wouldn't really have it any other way. Not if I actually stop and think about it. Yeah, if I actually stop and think about it, I am glad that anybody can just, print to PDF from Word or whatever and put something out there. And so we're awash in people's creativity and imagination. And in many ways, that's brilliant. In other ways, it's not so brilliant because we don't really have good ways to discern or to gatekeep, at certain quality levels. That's where all of this falls down a bit, I think, especially that now we have bots writing reviews or people being paid to write misleading reviews. And then at the same time, reviewers are getting separated from the audience. Their tastes are diverging. So it's very hard to navigate to find the things that you would like. And we are seeing AI being abused to churn out bollocks. And we are... The other problem I'm having is when I want to commission art, there's a hell of a lot more scammers than there used to be. Not just AI art scammers, but people passing off other people's work as if it was their own. There's a lot of this sort of thing going on, and it becomes a depressing pain in the ass to deal with all of that, which in turn makes using AI more appealing because you don't have to treat everybody with suspicion and worry about being ripped off all the time. It's a horrible, vicious cycle, and I don't know how we can navigate all this. We will find a way, probably, but it's an arms race. That'll do for today. Zang.
Aren't you a little tired of so-called horror media about shiny, sparkly, angsty, whiny monsters? I know I am, and that's why I created Actual Fucking Monsters, where you will play an actual fucking monster doing horrible and monstrous things and being tracked down and killed for it. Buy now at DriveThruRPG, post-mort.com or lulu.com.